Welcome to the Living Wholehearted podcast, where we're helping leaders live with integrity.
Whether you're a mom or a CEO, you're a leader, and how you lead matters.
Welcome. It's the month of Valentine's, and we thought, what a better way to engage this month of love than talking about our emotions.
We're so excited to have a husband and wife team, John and Tristen Collins. Similar to Jeff and I, they both have a niche, but they've found a way to marry that together in their book, Why Emotions Matter. Tristen is a trauma counselor, and John is co-founder of the Bible Project. They also happen to be our friends. Tristen and I spent some time in grad school together a long time ago, and we even did our first years of practice together. We're so excited to have you two. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we're so happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Awesome. Tell us a little bit more about the stage of life you two are in, and what are you doing for fun right now?
Well, we have two boys, and our oldest is 8, and our youngest is 6. So right now we are really into games and playing Uno, Battleship, Pokemon, things like that.
Yes.
And then winter sports, I'm trying to teach them to ski. And then we found that some indoor rock climbing places right now is kind of a good activity. So just trying to figure out a way to stay dry in Portland.
Yeah, I love it. All right, you got the spirit of adventure. That's a wonderful thing to have, and you guys are exploring. I was just out on the mountain with my youngest yesterday, trying to do the same thing, John.
Yeah, nice. Do you guys go to Meadows or Timberline or Ski Bowl?
We hit Timberline. That was her second time ever, and there were some emotions on the mountain, and I was working to navigate that a little bit. And you guys' book, I need to dig a little deeper into it.
All right, John. So tell us a little bit more about how you started the Bible Project. How did that come about? Give us an insider peek at where that is even today.
Yeah, the Bible Project, we started it 6 years ago, going on 6 years ago. My colleague, friend, Tim Mackey, I met in undergrad studying the Bible here in Portland at Multnomah Bible College. We became friends, actually mostly became friends because our wives became friends. Tristen is good friends with his wife, went to Multnomah with her. And he's a Bible nerd. He especially the Hebrew Bible, just did 2 decades of school and just went in the deep end. And anytime I've had any questions, he was the guy I would want to go to. And the conversations I had with him were always so encouraging because I felt like most of the time, I have tons of questions about the Bible and find the Bible actually really intimidating, even after studying it in undergrad and growing up with it. I grew up with the Bible, often would be confused. And Tim was the kind of guy that I could ask any question to, and I never felt afraid or ashamed of any question I had. And I found that really rare for people. I found that most of the time in those type of conversations, someone will begin to wonder how devoted to Jesus you are or how much you really are a Christian if you ask too many questions. And Tim was just never that way. And we come out of these conversations just more devoted to following Jesus and more excited about the Bible. So we started making videos together 6 years ago that just explain the literary shape of the Bible, the themes that tie the whole biblical narrative together. And we put them up on YouTube and then crowdfunded it, and it really took off. So you could find we have about 145 videos right now, and that library just keeps growing. We release a video every 3 weeks, and these videos are a really easy way to begin to understand the narrative of the Bible.
That's awesome.
I love it.
Yeah. We love the artistic side of it, love the theological side of it, and love the way it's helping people in our lives make a connection to the word in ways in which they hadn't experienced before. We've seen that happen, haven't we, Ann?
Yeah. So thank you. Thank you so much for what you're doing and the way it's impacting so far beyond where you guys could reach just in Portland, Oregon.
Awesome. Yeah. Our pleasure.
Well, Tristen, why counseling?
So I did my undergrad degree at Multnomah in Bible and theology. And so I'm interested in both theology and psychology because they give us insight and wisdom to the human condition. And I love how counseling is the merging of both of those interests.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. It's a beautiful blend of both your expertise. And so let's talk a little bit about your book. Okay, so why did you start with emotions? That's what you spent your whole book talking about. Tell us why emotions.
Well, just studying about trauma, I saw a consistent theme that to recover from the impact of trauma is being able to identify and manage your emotions. And then I was also seeing that that same skill is also the skill for emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence is really vital for being spiritually mature as well. I really love how Peter Scazzaro in his book, Emotional Healthy Church, says that you can't be spiritually mature without also being emotionally mature.
So good.
So I think that I really just wanted to dive further into the more therapeutic skills and then also just merging together the biblical wisdom that John and I have both gained from learning from Tim and also Timothy Keller as well as really influenced us. So we did this project together.
Yeah, it started out as Tristen's book to be something that she could use in her counseling and give to people and put down her thoughts and insights over the years. And I was helping you put it together, just organize it. And at some point, we decided we should write it together, mainly because I became really fascinated with the topic of emotions, realizing that it was part of my life that I was completely missing out on. And Tristen, throughout our marriage, has told me this. And
yes. I get that too, John. I get that too.
Yep. Side effects of having therapists as wives.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
At one point, she put this sheet up in my office that had a chart of all these emotions. And she said, just look at this chart and identify what you're feeling. And this is a good first step. And I remember just looking at this chart, and it was like looking at the cockpit of an airplane. It was like,
yes.
I have no idea what any of this means. And then about the time this book was really coming to fruition, was taking shape, there was a number of things going on in my life that all of these emotions were just starting to come out, and I just didn't know what to do with them. And so really writing this book together became a place for me as a rational skeptic who likes to suppress emotions, pretend they don't exist, to explore it, to see why emotions matter to being human, and then to work with Tristen on just organizing all her thoughts and writing it together. So it was a fun project to work on together.
Yeah.
Challenging. Challenging but fun. Yeah. And I love, John, what you just identified yourself as a rational skeptic, and as it related to this emotional palette, if you will. I mean, it's like that you were willing to explore it with a healthy level of skepticism. I'm just curious, what did you discover as you did? You discovered that it was sort of cathartic for you, if I heard you correctly in there, but was there anything else that you discovered as you entered that investigation, that exploration, that you didn't see at first?
Well, yeah, the biggest paradigm shift for me was that I pictured myself, my humanity, as being a brain on a stick. And I think I had that picture of myself because I grew up in a spiritual tradition that really emphasized your rationality. What you believe in God is most important. And so believe the right doctrine. And it was a lot about just knowing and understanding. Also, I'm a 5 on the Enneagram, so I'm a heady kind of person. And then I was modeled stoicism from my dad. And my mom growing up had kind of explosive emotions. And so all of those things just made me just be like, okay, I'm going to be a rational person. Emotions are dangerous. Emotions are scary. And I actually just kind of lived in my mind. And what the biggest paradigm for me was realizing that I have a body, which is just a funny realization that I'm not a head on a stick. And I was telling this to my friend, a colleague at the Bio Project, Tim, and he looked at me and he said, "No, John, you don't have a body. you are a body.
Yeah.
And like, what are you talking about? And so he started really unpacking to me that this Hebrew idea of being a nephesh, which is the Hebrew word for soul. We translate it soul. And
That's
it really is this idea of being a living, breathing, embodied person. And that God created us as embodied creatures, and that's good. And this idea of this disembodied ideal state of soulless being or something was not really the narrative of the Bible. The narrative of the Bible is one day having new bodies and continuing to be embodied creatures. So that was the biggest paradigm for me, was like, I am a body and my body is important. And our body, one of the things it does for us is it communicates to us through the emotional palette, as you put so well, Jeff.
Those are great insights. You're not a brain on a stick. I want to ask a question that's sort of a nice tie-in, because you guys describe this religious tradition and what have you. We find ourselves Tara and I find ourselves talking about emotions at the bottom of all of our work, whether in the counseling office or in the coaching, leadership coaching, or organizational development spheres. But why do you think the church, particularly, guys, has a hard time understanding emotions?
Well, I think one reason is that, and this isn't true for all traditions, but the tradition I grew up in is highly influenced by a very strict dualism that comes from like Descartes, which then you could also trace all the way down to Plato, which is we are like souls trapped in a body, that this ghost in the machine idea, which that comes from Greek thought, and it doesn't mesh really with Jewish thought, but it's been imported into our tradition. And so I find it actually really refreshing to go back and look at the biblical narrative and see how much God cares. I mean, he created these dirt creatures and says, you are my partners to rule the earth, and with me and my wisdom. And then the psalmist, like Psalm 8, would just trip out and go, wow, these creatures that you created us to be, you've even placed us higher than other spiritual beings, the angels. We're that important. But it's not because we're some disembodied soul. It's because we are these human creatures. And so I think that's one big reason is dualism.
Yeah. And then another, I think, just, thinking about personality and, John, I think just innately is different than me, in that he doesn't really like strong emotions and doesn't like being carried away by strong feelings. And then, another influence, of course, is our family. So that would be definitely from the field of psychology, understanding how much we're influenced by our family and relationships.
It's so true. I'm laughing because I just feel like I was listening to the Bible Project there, right, John? As you were talking, I could picture the animations going across the screen right now. Oh, I love it. So you guys did talk a little bit a lot about your marriage. You used your marriage as the foundational example for how emotions impact us and how it's impacted your marriage. Tell us a little bit more about who you guys are, your story, and what you brought into the book. What elements of your marriage?
Well, we met and got married really early in life. We were in our early 20s, and we were drawn to each other, I think, because we are different, very opposite in the way we view emotions. And it's true, just opposites attract. And we learned pretty early on in our marriage that the same thing that drew us together became one of the biggest points of conflict in our marriage. I just ignoring emotions, wanting to suppress emotions. And then I started to try to make Tristen do that as well. So don't get angry. Don't be so sad. And that created tons of conflict. I also, because I didn't know how to manage my own emotions, I would actually try to get Tristen to emote for me, which is something we learned in counseling. And it was a big aha. It's like, oh, that's what I'm doing. That's why I'm poking her like that.
Emotionally, he would know what buttons to press. And I agreed to express them unconsciously.
Ah.
Yeah, and pause real quick there for our listeners. That is not something that's conscious, but all of us do at some level, whether we're the high feeler or the suppressor, right? So as you guys processed, you had those ahas. So in hindsight, John, you know what you were doing, but at the time, I imagine you had no clue.
No clue.
Yes. I mean, you can definitely see that with kids. Like, I mean, we see that with the dynamics of our boys, that our oldest knows what buttons to push in the youngest and vice versa. And usually it's they're upset about something that they want to antagonize the other to express.
Well, it's so exciting, this book. I honestly, as a therapist, I'm excited just to be able to hand someone a book. I get that question a lot, really, why do emotions matter? In fact, even from the pulpit, I hear a lot of times that we're to ignore our emotions. So you've really done a beautiful job of actually unpacking that biblical narrative, integrating the trauma-informed research, and understanding how our bodies are a huge part of how it's playing out in our marriages. And so let's talk a little bit more about your marriage, because I think we're all a little curious. You guys have a lot of stories that you pulled from. What's one of your favorite stories that you share in your book for our listeners to get a sample from your story?
Yeah. So we peppered stories throughout the book just as a way to look at an emotion in a real life situation. And we try to be vulnerable. And, Tristen was just remarking before this interview that she really likes the story we put towards the end of the book, which is we went out to this restaurant that we've been wanting to eat at for a while. And we had finished probably the second draft of the book. And we were kind of on the we were like, we could see the end of the tunnel, the light at the end of the tunnel. And we were both excited for the book to be done. And so we're having dinner, and I just make some bonehead comment to her that just pokes the bear kind of thing. Like, I don't remember what it was, but I just said something that was mean. And Tristen got angry, and I don't like anger. I'm really uncomfortable around anger. And I actually find that my paradigm is that if you're showing me anger, it's unkind, because you should deal with anger yourself, not put it on me. And which is just a weird paradigm to have grown up with. And so anyways, she's getting angry. I'm getting frustrated. The food comes out. We ordered wrong. It's really bad. We're frustrated at that. The whole thing is just spiraling out of control. And I'm thinking to myself, like, we just wrote a book about emotion.
Yes.
And here we are, like, we're supposed to have this nice dinner, and it's like now just this mess. And I remember asking you, Tristen, like, can we just pause, time out, restart? And like, I could do that because I'm like, I can compartmentalize, and at least I think I could do that. And Tristen was like, no, I can't. Like, I just can't. This is where we're at.
Yeah. And I think what we realized in that is that we both were exhausted. And so what our emotions were really communicating is exhaustion. And that was the first time that I think, we got away. And I think, you get more in tune with just the limitations of how you're feeling. But what I appreciate about that story is just, we're always going to be in process, and that emotional health isn't a one and done thing, but it's just an ongoing process that doesn't make you a better person, because God just loves us right where we're at. So I think because we know that we're loved exactly where we're at, that we can just lean into the messy process. And it's not something that's going to make us better in the eyes of God or others, but rather just something that can enhance our lives and our relationships.
So good, you guys. It's so classic. I often feel that same way, John, when I'm like, we just wrote a book, or we just talked on healthy communication. Why are we?
We're going
It's just
in 10 minutes. We're
classic.
supposed to be on stage.
It's so classic.
Yeah,
right. But I love that narrative.
It's good humility place to be, I guess.
Totally humbling. And I love Tristen how it's such a reminder, the process. And it reminds me of working out. I think, oh, okay, I did my workout. I'm done for my life.
Yeah.
and the heart needs more exercise than just, my one run out of my entire life. So I got to keep working, got to keep being aware, staying in tune. And so the same is for emotions and learning those to grow those muscles and to keep them in shape in a way. So
yes, I love that. Yeah, the parallels of emotional health and physical health. I think they're very interconnected and similar dynamics at play.
Totally. So, John, you said something about anger not being something that you like. What do you think is one of the hardest chapters for your readers to get through? Which emotion do readers seem to have the hardest time with?
I haven't heard us like one emotion being the hardest for everyone. Probably because we all come with our own stories, and so we all struggle with our own things. We start with shame because that is so tied into your identity, and so I think most people really struggle with shame. So that's the first emotion we walk through. For me, it's anger. For other people, it's fear. For many people, it's sadness. So, I mean, it really depends.
Yeah, I would definitely say it depends on your personality and circumstances. Because even just John and I are very different in what we prefer to feel and don't feel.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
so
Tristen, you are, we've talked about how anger is kind of a secondary emotion sometimes, or what do you call it?
No, the anger often has feelings connected with it underneath that, sadness is always underneath, or can be underneath anger at times. But I feel like for me, I feel like the feeling that's actually harder for me to acknowledge is probably more jealousy. Because, being more of an Enneagram 2, I like to pride myself on helping people, and jealousy seems like a very petty feeling. But I think jealousy is such an important feeling because it reveals what we really value. And I think the more attuned we are to the things that trigger a desire in us, I think the healthier that we can be about those desires.
So good. I just have to mirror something back and then I'll let Jeff talk. But I love what I'm hearing in kind of this undergirding that emotions are a cue to something beneath the surface. So that jealousy, to not be afraid of the emotion, but what you're saying is underneath, it just cues me into what the desires of my heart are. And so if I suppress the jealousy, then I'm suppressing those desires of the heart, which are God given. And so I love that paradigm. And you set it up so beautifully in your book to just normalize all these emotions. And I love how you divide the chapters up by the emotions. So as for our listeners, it's a super cool setup to be able to open and just say, oh, we're going to talk about shame. And then we're going to talk about sadness. Yeah. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, Tara, I got to give you some props here. One of the metaphors you gave me, which was, and you shared it with others. I'm a fly fisherman. I love the river. And when you talk about things that are under emotion, like, I've spent a lot of time on the surface of water and different turbulence. And I study river, especially when I'm navigating or guiding. And it's what's going on the surface. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks when you shared this with me years ago, is indicative of what's beneath. And I mean, the boulders, the rocks, the terrain that's underneath is creating everything that's on top. And that was just that was the 2x4 God used in my life to help me embrace the idea that I wasn't just a brain on a stick either, John.
Yeah, I love that metaphor.
Well, you guys, we're talking Valentine's a little bit here, which is the emotion of love. And that brings up a lot of emotions and expectations in and of itself. We'd love to ask you guys, what's a practical piece of wisdom, for this month of love, where people are thinking about love and all of its definitions, right? There's so many different definitions, but what comes to mind, and what practical piece of advice might you offer our listeners as it relates to the emotion of love?
Well, I do think that anger and jealousy can definitely pop up for some people. We spoke a little bit about jealousy, so I'll talk about anger. but that anger and, people that have a difficult time with anger, they might say, oh, I'm not angry, I'm just frustrated. But it's in that same family, and that anger is often a signal of unmet expectations, and that those expectations, going deeper, it reveals our view of right and wrong. And so when we look throughout the stories of Scripture about humans, they don't really do a great job at defining what is right and wrong apart from God. And so we tend to see that our human nature after the fall is that we manipulate the rules of right and wrong towards our self-interest, where God's wisdom bends right and wrong towards the benefit of others, and that he gives us grace that breaks those rules of right and wrong and gives that gift that's undeserved. And so I think during Valentine's Day, I think it's a great time to really evaluate those expectations, evaluate the rules of right and wrong that might be within your heart, and then trying to reframe it in the context of God's definition of right and wrong, and his perspective, I would say, of right and wrong, and how he's, abundant in grace and breaking the rules of legalism.
Mm-hmm.
So good. What a great place to land. I wish we could spend more time with you. There's so many more questions I have, but if people want to find you guys, tell us how they can check out your book. Where do they follow you? Let us know where people can go.
Yeah, so you can go to whyemotionsmatter.com and you can download a free chapter of the book there.
2 chapters, I think.
Oh, yeah, 2 chapters even. And then the book is available on Amazon. You can purchase it there. And yeah, those are 2 good spots to check it out.
Awesome. And then the Bible Project, John?
The Bible Project, BibleProject.com. And if you're a YouTuber, you go to youtube.com/the Bible Project, and all of our videos are there as well.
Awesome. So I am feeling excited. What are you feeling, Jeff?
I'm feeling excited too. And I also am feeling attracted to you right now.
Oh gosh. How does that come out of this podcast?
It's because your breath is so fresh.
Tristen did talk about maybe writing a chapter on, what did you call it?
What are you talking about?
Oh, on being attracted to your...
Oh, yes. Like arousal.
Yes, arousal.
Yeah.
What do you call that?
I'm going to cut that out of the book.
No,
we wanted that chapter. What happened?
That might have been a little too
that'll take a whole book.
Uncomfortable for some people. Yeah.
Okay. That is their next book. No pressure, but we are having a whole book on arousal. I'm excited about it. Coming to you next year.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Oh, you guys, I'm cracking up because here we are, 2 sets of couples who work together, are married, raising children, and we have our own things going. It's a lot to juggle. So thank you. We know the hard work that goes into writing a book. And we know that so much of your life and heart and expertise has brought into this. So please, please, please go get this book. It will be foundational for every relationship, your relationship with God, yourself, your marriage, your children, your colleagues. It'll touch every part of who you are.
Yeah, emotions and how we understand them, regulate them, comfort them is vital to our leadership and those we lead in, that are in our wake, our leadership wake. Thank you, Tristen and John. You guys are awesome. Okay. As an audience, if you like what you've heard today, you know where to find more on John and Tristen, and you can also continue listening to our podcasts and others learning about the Living Wholehearted podcast.
Thank you for joining us in being a leader committed to shrinking the integrity gap between the values we espouse and the values we actually live out in practice.